Okay, welcome back. Please find a seat if you don't prefer to stand up. This year we are again very fortunate that Mark Devlin would come and share his great knowledge with us. And Mark he was here last year, had a very exciting lecture about a world which we just think is amusement. And we just see the glamour in the television or in the video, and our kids see the same. And we like to go to music festivals and drink beers and have fun, talk with our friends. But behind the scenes, the world is quite different. And Mark have done a tremendous effort, and the amount of research put into this book is, It's incredible. You have a small person, but you have a very large brain.
I like that. I remember that.
That was actually a compliment.
I'm going to use that one.
So normally we do not do a lot of commercials, but I would say for this book I would, because I'm a music lover myself. I will say after this book I'm not so much anymore. But the depth described different aspects on the music industry, the music satanic industry, I will rather say, is really incredible and very good described in this book. And in this lecture we will try to come with examples on backmasking, on mind control, and also put you to a test if So I think we should get a very warm welcome to Mark Devlin for the reality talk.
Yeah, it's all nice family-friendly stuff, you know, ritual sacrifice, demonic possession, all that good stuff, you know.
Yeah, Mark.
Happy stuff.
You wrote this book. You have been a DJ for how many years? Since 1990?
26 years now.
Yeah. And made jobs in 40 countries. So why this sudden change in your reality to go into the depth and do research to make this book? What do you try to accomplish?
Yeah, well, my DJ gigs have given way to conferences and talks like this. These are my new gigs these days. So what happened was 6 years ago, I came to a realization that the world is nothing like we thought it was, as I'm sure many people in this room can relate to. And I set about trying to understand how I'd been made a mug of, basically. What it is with me is I'm someone that doesn't appreciate being taken for a fool. And I realized that I'd spent my entire life being duped and mugged off. And I wanted to understand how it had been done. It was very important to me to understand that process. And my specialist area was how this overall dynamic plays out in the music industry, of which I'd been a part as a DJ. And so I threw myself into research into all the different areas that the corporate music industry is used for in terms of mass mind control, social engineering, and shaping and molding people's perceptions and values. And it was a 5-year process. Like Simon and Joe, it took me 5 years to put the information together. But everything that I came to discover has gone into this book. There's a whole load of stuff that I've discovered since, which is going into volume 2, but everything that I discovered up to that point is in that book. And the reason I wanted to put it across in that way is because, first of all, I had been a writer as well as a DJ. So I'd written for various music magazines, and I realized that I could communicate information in written form. I realized it was a gift that I needed to use. Also, music is universal. Everybody loves it. Everybody loves some form of music, whether it's country and western, whether it's hip-hop, whether it's rock. Everyone can relate to it. And the thing about music is, as you mentioned in your introduction, people see it as a form of entertainment. They see it as harmless. They see it as fun. Nobody would ever believe that they're getting their world values dictated by the sort of music they listen to. much less that there's kind of dark, occultic, energetic stuff going on at an unseen level through the music that you listen to. But all of this is very real. So it's important for me to communicate it. And the thing about music is you don't have to ram it down people's throats. People come to it, and people will pay for music. They pay to go and see live acts. They pay to buy records because they see it as just that, entertainment. So it is a brilliantly effective way for those who don't have humanity's best interests at heart to get a hold over large swathes of the population. I've seen different aspects of the story told in other books. So you get researchers that have gone into mind-controlled artists, you get authors that have looked at the dark occult elements, but as far as I can tell, nobody's ever pulled together all these different strands of the story and put it into one book before. And so that was something that I wanted to do, and it's something that I've hopefully achieved with this volume.
Absolutely. Could you please turn a little bit so the audience over there? Yeah, absolutely. You have covered a wide range, and I thought I knew something about music, also the dark side, but you uncovered a lot more details than I actually hoped to have known, but life is a bitch.
Sure is.
Yeah. So, but in the book, we will just come with some small examples for the book. Of course, it's for sale out there, and if you find it interesting, you can buy it out there, and when there's no one, it's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble, and you can get copies direct from me as well.
Yeah. But in the book, you're stating about backmasking music. That means music played from behind, that it could actually be a sort of praise of Satan. When people hear like this, they start to lift one eyebrow. So I will just play the most famous example with Led Zeppelin. You can see it here on the page. We need to shift a little bit to do it because a lot of this YouTube I'm not allowed to download, maybe just because I'm not too good to technique. That is a possibility. So we are actually going directly on YouTube to show you this example here. Where do I have? What about the audience? Is that totally nonsense for you, or is there actually something here? How many think that this is, we search for something which isn't here? Raise your hands. Yeah, you know, if we let's say, if we take the last lecture, we try to propagandize you now to believe that if you play some music backwards, we are praising Satan. So do you think it's reliable that this Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven was actually played in reverse, praising Satan? Yeah? How many think? Okay, so that's pretty much half and half, I would say, yeah? We have another example with Madonna. I will just play The original first was Justify My Love, just a small part of it, so people know what song it is. Most probably you can also put some comments to this video. You're welcome. I think you got an impression also about the subject of this song.
Praying for you to justify my love.
You get the gist, right?
And now we are gonna play the same song in reverse.
Just for that one as well.
So, how many of you heard something here? You didn't even have, oh, that was an improvement in a very short time, huh? Yeah? Also better quality. Your angle on this, because you put it into the book, do you think it is a purpose with this, or you think it's a clear coincidence that some people are hearing it and some don't?
Well, like Johan said this morning, I don't believe there's any such thing as coincidence. I think everything happens for a reason. I believe in synchronicity, synchromysticism, whatever label you want to put on it, but there's meaning in all these things. Those are two very good examples of backmasking in operation. Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven is a song that you hear about time and time again when this subject area is discussed. And actually, if you go on Led Zeppelin's Wikipedia page, quite incredibly, they discuss the idea that that song contains a backward message, and you can play the backward message for yourself to judge it. And then the Madonna record Justify My Love is one that I remember chilling me to the bone when it first came out in 1990. And this is an anecdote that I've told before at a few public talks, where I'd heard about this idea that this Madonna record contained a backwards message from a TV program that was on a show called The Word in the UK back in 1990. I was working in a radio station at the time that still used old school reels of tape. And late one night, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, which is an interesting time, because 3 a.m. is said to be the witching hour, where this so-called physical reality is said to be at its closest to, other realms of existence. But it was 3 o'clock in the morning. It was just me and the on-air DJ in the radio studio, and I decided to reverse that particular record and see if I could hear a message for myself. And I did that, and I heard what you heard just there. And it did sound to me as if I was hearing I Love Satan over and over. And I think that's probably what those people that raised their hand were hearing in that record. As I say, that chilled me to the bone. I went next door into the other studio to get the DJ to say, come next door and have a listen to what I've just discovered. And when I played the reel of tape back, there was absolutely nothing on it. It had been completely erased. And I have no explanation as to how that happened, but as I say, it did kind of freak me out. So that's why I say these are two good examples of this dynamic. So when it comes to backmasking, there are three general schools of thought, which is, first of all, it's all a load of bollocks, and you hear anything that you want to hear. So if you set out to convince yourself that you're going to listen to a satanic message, you will make yourself think that you've heard one, okay? So the second possibility is that there are indeed messages encoded in backwards recordings, but they've been placed there deliberately by the music makers. So for instance, John Lennon in many interviews said that the Beatles used backmasking all the time as a prank, just as a bit of a laugh. They were deliberately putting this stuff into their recordings. And the third option is that there is a message there which can be heard in reverse, but it's done without the conscious knowledge of the music makers, and something else is expressing itself there. And this is where we get into a concept which is known as reverse speech. And it's all to do with inversion. We live in a reality where we have duality in everything. For every force or every concept in nature, there's a polar opposite of it. And we live in a satanically inverted society where everything that is natural and is pure and is rooted in love has been turned on its head by the dark controllers that we have in this reality and made satanic and made to embrace the opposite of that kind of consciousness. So the idea with reverse speech is you have therapists and practitioners who will tell you that when people express themselves in speech, their true intent and stuff that's really on their mind and which really reflects their nature can be expressed in the form of their speech in backwards form. It's encoded backwards. It's this inversion that we have inherent in reality. And a lot of these therapists, there's a guy called David Oates, who's an Australian, and there's a guy called John Kelly, who has a company called Your Inner Voice in Vancouver, Canada. And these guys get people to come into their clinics that have unresolved issues or trauma in their lives or things they want to sort out, issues. And they get them to speak at great length, and they record what they've said. Then they reverse the recording and very painstakingly, over a long period of time, listen for hidden clues and messages in the backwards speech of these people. And so the practitioners in this area tell you that this is a very real concept and that we can express certain aspects of our nature in our speech coming through the subconscious mind without being aware of it. And when you consider this in the concept of music, you have the possibility that there are certain messages coming through in backwards form in these recordings which express the true nature of the music makers without necessarily their full conscious knowledge. So these are two very interesting artists to look at, because Led Zeppelin, particularly Jimmy Page, have long had a deep fascination with the world of the dark occult, and particularly the teachings of Aleister Crowley. Jimmy Page famously was obsessed with the works of Crowley, as many musicians have been. David Bowie, Elton John, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Jay-Z even, have all been very much into the occult mystery school teachings of Crowley. And then Madonna is often referred to as the grand priestess of the Illuminati music industry. A lot of her imagery in stage shows and music videos and stuff is absolutely steeped in Masonic, Kabbalistic, esoteric kind of imagery. And she would appear to be a chosen one of the industry, a very key player, very much down with the mind control agenda that's being rolled out through these corporations. So of the three possibilities as to whether backmasking is real, whether it's done consciously or whether it's done unconsciously, from what I've come to discover through my research, I would suggest that it's a very real phenomenon and that there are aspects of these artists and what they represent and what it is that they're a part of that's coming through in these recordings. So we had a couple of examples there. I Love Satan, Here's to My Sweet Satan. The true nature of the corporate music industry is, unfortunately, deeply satanic. And at the helm of it all, you have a dark occult priest class that are dictating and directing the actions of these industries. So a lot of it is about corporate greed and corporate manipulations just to make lots of money. But I would say that if you discount the idea that there's a dark occult priest class dealing with some very sinister stuff at the very top of the tree, then you're missing the point as to what these industries are all about.
Yeah, one example of that is Madonna's performance at the Super Bowl.
Sure.
That was
Deeply occultic.
Really, yeah. We can of course cover some of the subjects in the book because you go in deep with a lot of different things. Also, something you talked about last year, but some of the thing you also describe in the book is mind control on some artists. And again, for the audience to understand what we talk about, here is an example with Britney Spears in an interview.
This spasm of publicity about what happened from Mexico to London.
It was pretty rough, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew, strong Britney. Yeah, it was a weird. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Weird. Ah, weird. Hello.
I think something happened there, and there are a lot of other examples. We have a limited time here, so I just selected this one. But could you give your meaning, what is going on here, and other artists, you named other artists which also have been in according to your...
Sure. Well, I got a chill down my spine watching that because I've seen it many times before, but I know what's going on. We have what is known as, or a program which came out of the CIA known as MKUltra, which is a mass mind control program. It uses many different techniques to mind control large numbers of people. There's a division of it known as monarch programming, and it's absolutely rampant throughout the entertainment industry, in the Hollywood movie industry, and big time in the corporate music industry. There are many artists who show all the signs of having been subject of trauma-based mind control programming. What we saw with Britney Spears there is an absolute classic textbook example of an individual dissociating from reality temporarily, and that's what this programming is designed to do. They often get these artists at very young ages, from about the age of 5 or 6, and they're subject to satanic ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control programming. It's absolutely horrific stuff, and it exposes the mind to such terrible levels of trauma that the only way it can deal with it is to shatter and split into different compartments. And it's been discovered that each of these compartments of the mind can then be programmed with a different personality, which can be brought forward at will by way of a trigger. It can be a word or a phrase or a color or a sound. And that's what we're seeing happen with many of these artists. So when you see something like that with Britney Spears, it's a pretty surefire indicator that she's been subject to this programming, I would suggest. Other artists that have shown similar signs would be Michael Jackson, Mariah Carey, Nicki Minaj, big time, who actually dissociates and goes into different personalities in the middle of press interviews, definitely giving you a clue to know. Lil Wayne, and a whole bunch of others. The reason that the controllers do this is they want to be absolutely in control of those artists that they choose to be at the forefront of the industry. So when you get a household name like Britney Spears, another contemporary example would be Miley Cyrus, rather than leaving it to random chance as to the sort of things that these people are going to say in interviews, the way that they're going to conduct themselves in stage shows, the controllers want to absolutely direct and manipulate every aspect of that. And so they have their chosen ones that they elevate to these positions. A lot of it comes down to the genealogy and the ancestry of these individuals. Bloodlines are the key to so much, and many of these bloodlines go back several generations. And when you trace the ancestry of many of these artists, you find some very interesting things. And I've come to realize that absolutely anyone that is placed in the public eye now, whether it's as a pop star, a Hollywood actor, a politician, some kind of cultural icon, are placed there, and in most cases, they're placed there by virtue of the bloodline from which they come. So there's all kinds of fascinating examples. Just to give you a couple of very intriguing ones. Sherry Blair, the wife of the mass-murdering psychopathic war criminal Tony Blair, who was a barrister, Sherry. Her maiden name is Sherry Booth, and genealogists have discovered that she's actually descended from John Wilkes Booth, who is the guy that is said to have assassinated Abraham Lincoln. What are the chances of that happening just at random? Then you have John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas, one of the key groups that came out of Laurel Canyon. His first wife was Susan Adams, who was directly descended from John Adams, the American president. You hear rumors or very strong suggestions that Bill Clinton is actually the illegitimate son of Winston Churchill. And you get the same thing about Barbara Bush, George Bush Sr.'s wife. A lot of researchers think that she is directly descended from Aleister Crowley, or is the daughter of Aleister Crowley. So what are the chances that these people that are in the public eye, that are household names that everyone has heard of, have these bloodlines and this genealogy going way back into aristocracy and royalty and US presidents and stuff like that? You even hear that Kim Kardashian is directly related to David Cameron, the former Prime Minister of the UK. Something's got to account for the fact of why she's all over TV and everybody's heard of her, but nobody quite knows what it is she does. She's been put into the public eye because they like their chosen ones to be there, where they can keep an eye on them, where they can direct them in the roles that they're supposed to play. So these people are lifetime actors, where they present to us a public persona and we think of them in a certain way, but the reality of the situation is they're somebody completely different. And these bloodlines are very key to understanding how they select these people. It's also my view that they allow certain individuals that aren't from key bloodlines to work their way up through the system to become household names, to become celebrities. And these individuals have to show just how much they want the fame and the fortune, and they have to pay a very heavy price in order to be elevated to those positions. And this is where we get into the concept of selling your soul for fame and fortune, which I would suggest is a very real concept as well. But mind control is very real, and we have the opportunity to understand what's going on when we see little situations like this. There are many other examples. We have a lot of symbolism that is placed out there in music videos and in stage shows and stuff to give us the opportunity to know that a certain artist has been subject to mind control programming as well. Things like teddy bears, dolls, broken mirrors, they're all absolute telltale signs of monarch programming and trauma-based mind control.
In the book you also state that when they reach the age about 30, some of this mind control can actually start to not work anymore. And I think, I don't have the picture here because it just comes to me, but there is a famous picture with Britney Spears where she's totally have lost all her hair and she's fighting for her children and her fortune, which her parents actually want to take away from her. So her life is a total misery at that point, and that could also be a combination of this mind control spell is actually not existing anymore, or what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think when you get episodes like that, it's an indication of the mind control programming starting to wear down, break off. And researchers into this area often say that if individuals are subject to this type of programming at a very young age, about the age of 5 or 6, by the time they reach their late 20s to early 30s, the programming quite often breaks off and they have to go back into the lab for reprogramming. So when you saw Britney Spears going a bit crazy and shaving off all her hair and attacking cars with umbrellas, that to me was an indication that she needed to go back to get the programming topped up. We had a similar incident with Mariah Carey in 2001 where she also went a bit crazy and she's said to have attempted suicide and started behaving in a very incoherent and unpredictable manner. We had a similar thing with Justin Bieber just about 4 or 5 years ago in London. He started behaving a bit crazy. And in all cases, what you find is these celebrities immediately disappear from the public eye for a few months. We hear nothing about them. And then when the time is deemed right, they're back. New album, new single, new look, new makeover. Absolute classic sign of the programming being topped up, and they're now ready to continue the agenda. We see that a lot.
Yeah. Another thing which you are describing briefly in the book is the whole paradigm with the tune of the instruments, what hertz it's recorded. And when we listen to music, it's recorded in 440 hertz. But many people state that 432 hertz is actually a harmonic frequency. And I know in your next book you will go really deep into the subject, and also you have an explanation. But first we want to make a little test with you. I'm going to play 2 short guitar music, and one of it is in 440 hertz and the other one is in 432 hertz. You have to guess which is which.
We like our fun little games, don't we?
Now it's our turn to have fun, huh? Yeah. Okay, now I played the first one. You will get both of them after each other, and afterwards you decide. They will not see anything up there. So now it's going to be exciting, huh?
Absolutely.
The first piece we played, how many of you think that that was 440 hertz?
Does it mean the slower one or the
432 hertz is what we call a harmonic frequency. You will talk a little bit.
432 is said to be a harmonic frequency in tune with the universe, with creation, that makes you feel good. 440 is said to be dissonant, discordant, puts you on edge, doesn't make you feel good at all.
So we can ask the first one, which believe that was 440? How many believe it was 432? Okay. And with the second one, the other way around. That
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
That's very, very interesting, because I must say when I heard it, the first one we were playing was actually 432, and I actually felt that, but maybe because I've been reading about it.
We knew, didn't we?
Yeah.
So, and these people didn't.
Yeah. So in that way, it's very interesting.
That is interesting, yeah, because I'm not a sound engineer or a musicologist myself. I'm a researcher, but I have a lot of friends who are audiophiles, you know, musicologists, sound engineers, producers. They take sound very seriously, and they all concur that 432 is absolutely a harmonic frequency that we should be listening to music at. It's all to do with the standard tuning pitch, A equals 432 hertz or A equals 440. And it was seen to, many decades ago, that 440 would become the industry standard tuning pitch to which musical instruments and sound recordings were tuned. And it replaced 432. And musicologists question why the hell this was done, because they say 440 is a frequency which is completely out of sync with the human energy field, human brain waves, the natural frequency of the earth. You know, it's absolutely the wrong frequency to be listening to music at. And they claim that 432 is the one. But we played this music here, and the majority of people, it would seem, preferred listening to the music at 440, or at least thought that was the harmonic frequency. So I must admit, I struggle myself to tell the difference through just listening to it. I'm just going by information that's been presented by those that have researched this subject. So 432 is said to be this harmonic frequency. Very interesting when you get into the numbers, because 432 is part of a fascinating cosmic sequence, which if you started at 27, it's all multiples of 9. 27 is interesting because you have this concept of the 27 Club in the music industry through the ages. A large number of musicians who just happen to have died at the age of 27 in some strange circumstance or other. It's led many researchers to question whether this is some sort of ritual sacrifice in line with the belief systems of this occult priest class. So then you double 27, you get 54, you can double it again to 108, and we start to get into some of the dimensions and some of the movements of the planets and the sun and the moon. So 108 is related to the orbit of Saturn. Then you can double that to 216. We're getting into a precessional age, an astrological age, as part of the great year when you get into precession of the equinoxes. That's given us 2,160 years, so it's all in the numbers. 216,000 miles is said to be the distance from the Earth to the Moon. There's some difference on whether that's the case, but it's a number you often hear. So then you can double the 216 to get 432. And this is 432 hertz. You can double that again, you get 864. 864,000 miles is said to be the diameter of the sun. There's 864,000 seconds in a day and a night. So you see these same numbers and the multiples of them expressing themselves in the universe, in creation, in the dimensions of the heavenly bodies over and over. So it does lead to some validation, if you like, that 432 is a very important number. The 440 was introduced in the 1940s, and the story goes that it was discovered that military music that was played where the instruments were tuned to 440 caused soldiers in Nazi Germany to start marching and behaving in a very agitated, very disturbed kind of way, really putting them on edge and not feeling good about themselves. And those nice people, the Rockefellers, the Rockefeller Foundation, shouldn't call them people really, decided that it would be a great idea to see to it that 440 was introduced as the standard tuning pitch for all recorded music in the commercial world. And that has been the case for many decades. So most music that you listen to when it comes out of one of the big corporations is pitched to 440 rather than 432. So some researchers also point to 528, and 528 hertz is said to be a love frequency. There's a guy called Dr. Len Horowitz who's a big advocate of 528, and he claims that it's not 432, but it's 528 that we should be listening to music at. But I do think it's interesting when you consider that this reality, the building blocks of it are all sound and light energy. Everything is based in sound and light. And there have been many studies done to show how sound has healing properties. If you listen to the right sounds, it can literally cure disease and put you in a very good place and get your bodily rhythms all functioning the way they should. So if sound can be used for benevolent, positive healing purposes, the opposite must also apply, that it can be used for the opposite, to create a discordant effect, to maybe even cause disease, to make people feel hopeless and depressed and very negative. And it's my view that there's a lot going on at an unseen level in sound recordings that we listen to that we don't understand, and it can be having an effect on us without us realizing. Most modern music now, contemporary pop music, I know it makes me sound like an old bastard, but I can't listen to it. If it comes like, there's certain tracks, if they come on the radio, I have to reach for the off button because literally it starts to make me feel ill. I start to get panicky, I can't listen to it. And this never used to be the case. In the last few years, a lot of what purports to be so-called hip-hop, so-called R&B, and pop music generally makes me feel that way. And a lot of other people that I speak to as well say the same thing. People of a similar generation to myself that can remember better times, better music. So I think there's a lot going on at an unseen level with sound frequencies that we don't understand and that we need to. And this is something I intend to go into much more deeply in my next book.
Yeah, when we talked about it during the preparation for this open mind, we also talked about that some of us have been to a live concert where we simply thought it was so great. Everybody was cheering and dancing, and we just have the thrills, and it could be possible that they actually tune on 432 in a live concert, but what you listen to on CD or what we use today, I still use CD, sorry, then that is 440 hertz. So, but your next volume will explain a lot more of that.
Yeah, I want to get into that. And also cymatics. You know, I think a lot of people have probably seen the videos where people have put sand or salt onto a vibrating drum, and they've exposed the drum to certain sound frequencies, and then the sand arranges itself into patterns in accordance with the sound frequency. And some of them are quite beautiful harmonic patterns that seem to be completely in tune with nature and creation, and some of them are just hideous, you know, insane
cut figures.
Insane patterns that just look horrific, and they've got no form to them, and you know, they just look something you don't want to be associated with. I think a lot of the recorded music that we now get is having that kind of effect. If that's what it's doing to sand, and it has a similar effect on water, there have been experiments done by Dr. Emoto of Japan, most notably, into the effect that sound frequencies, and also the intent of certain words, whether it's a word in written form or spoken form, because it still carries the same energy and the same intent of the word, the effect that that can have on water crystals. And again, some of the patterns that can be formed by water when it's exposed to bad frequencies are quite horrific. And bearing in mind that a very large proportion of our human bodies is made up of water, you've got to ask yourself what effect listening to the average Nicki Minaj record is having on our bodies and our minds.
Yeah, maybe it was a good idea to make a studio where you can record in 432. Maybe that's...
Well, they do exist. There's a lot of producers and music makers that insist on recording their music at 432. You can get this music out there. You just don't get it from the corporations. So with all these big household celebrity names that we all know about, the Miley Cyruses and the Katy Perrys of this world, I think it's a fairly safe bet that they're not putting their music out at 432 hertz.
Okay. Interesting. One of the worst chapters in your book, there was, what a great commercial, huh? Yeah.
I know what you mean.
was the chapter about how much the music industry is filled with satanic rituals and sacrifices. Artists die young. Club 27, which you mentioned before, but also a lot of them seems to lose family members or close friends in their pursuing of fame. All that is very impossible to prove, actually, but you have gathered a collection of sacrifice, what do you call it, evidence in the book. So what's your take on? You have a lot of examples on it. What's your take on this?
Well, you make the point that it is very difficult to prove this one way or the other, and of course it is. So you have to go with your best guess based on the evidence that's available to you. But I mentioned earlier that you get these generational bloodlines that express themselves through the entertainment industry. And the chosen ones from these bloodlines are elevated to these positions of success. But there's also a facility for others to work their way up the ladder and to earn those positions for themselves if they sell their soul to the controllers and show just how much they want the fame and the fortune. And many researchers into this area have suggested that this is where you get the concept of blood sacrifices. So this is where an individual nominates somebody close to them, a family member, a close friend, to be sacrificed by the dark priest class that control this industry. I know it sounds fantastic and incredible to people hearing it for the first time, but there are a very large number of suspicious deaths in the entertainment industry through the ages that take some explaining away. The normal reliance, as far as the general public is concerned, is on them just thinking of the music industry as being this edgy, dangerous kind of profession that's full of drugs and alcohol and, you know, fast lifestyles. So when you get these young musicians turning up dead in hotel rooms at the age of 20-something, you know, the general public is coerced into thinking, oh, well, it just goes with the territory. It's part of the rock and roll lifestyle. You know, people take overdoses, they commit suicide. It's just part of this crazy industry. But I think they get away with a lot of very suspicious deaths by chalking them up as just one of those things. A great book for people to get into, which I usually cite in my work, and I've mentioned it a lot in my book because it's an invaluable piece of research, is Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon by the author Dave McGowan. Sadly, no longer with us. He passed away last year. But he left behind this great piece of work which goes into the hippie counterculture scene of the mid to late 1960s coming out of Laurel Canyon, this district of Los Angeles. And in the book, I mean, it blew me away. I knew a lot of this stuff already, but when I read the book and I looked at the body count, the amount of young musicians that have died at ridiculous ages, in their 20s, 30s, you know, even in their 40s and 50s, people shouldn't be dying in suspicious circumstances at the age of 52 even. You know, that's too early. That is not a full human life. And it's not just the musicians themselves. Like I say, it's family members, partners, managers. The body count is just ridiculous. And it's almost always chalked up as heroin overdose, suicide, you know, choking on barbiturates or whatever it is. But I think there's far more to know and to investigate in terms of all these strange deaths. So there are a lot of artists whose loved ones have passed away very suddenly. Kanye West's mum, for example, died at the drop of a hat. She was undergoing some sort of cosmetic surgery, and apparently the surgery process went wrong, and she just happened to die. Same thing with Bruno Mars's mum a couple of years ago. Dr. Dre lost his son, and also a few years ago a brother, in some quite unexplained circumstances. And it goes on and on and on in terms of Jennifer Hudson, the R&B singer, lost her mother, her brother, and a cousin together in a shooting incident in Chicago a few years ago. And, you know, you've got to ask yourself, why are all these artists so unlucky? Why do all these family members just happen to turn up dead? And it does tend to lend some weight to this idea of blood sacrifices, I would suggest. So hand in hand with the idea of blood sacrifices, you have these ritual kind of orgies and mad parties that a lot of these celebrities are apparently required to attend in order to show their allegiance to the industry and just how much they want to be famous. So if you imagine the scenes out of Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, they come across as like a Girl Guides picnic compared to the stuff that really goes down. We're talking ceremonial sex magic and, you know, all manner of unimaginable things which happen at these various ritual parties that celebrities attend. And when they've shown themselves to be prepared to degrade their morals to such a degree and absolutely debase and corrupt their spirituality, then they're seen as ripe for being elevated to one of these prominent positions. You know, this is a very dark and satanic industry. I wish it was some other way, but it is what it is, and the evidence speaks for itself. And these are dynamics that I see at play and which many other researchers have identified as well. So I'm not the only one saying this.
Yeah, there is also in the book mentioned the death of Whitney Houston. Sure. And 2 stages, 2 floors underneath, there was a great party with a lot of prominent people from the music industry actually in the backlight having a ritual over her death. So she have been placed in the bath or whatever happened for a long time, and actually if they had a ritual below, she could be the queen for the ritual. So yeah, it's very disturbing. You also mention this in the book, the importance of natural law and how the leaders using this to justify their actions. Could you explain what you mean about that?
I'll try and be very brief about it. It's quite a deep subject which takes some going into to properly convey it, but I know we're on limited time. So at the very end of the book, I wrap things up by talking about the concepts of consent, free will consciousness, and natural law. And anyone looking at the other subjects in the book, like mind-controlled artists and transhumanism and ritual sacrifices and stuff, might think, how the hell is there any kind of connection between all this and free will consciousness and natural law? But I think the way that this most effectively plays out is when you get into the realms of predictive programming, which Simon and Joe touched on in their talk. This is where they place depictions of things that are yet to come into works of popular culture, so music videos, cartoons, movies. 9/11 is the classic example. There were so many depictions of the events of 9/11 that were placed into all these works in the years leading up to it. And I believe, and many other researchers incidentally concur with this, that they are observing the tenets of natural law, which the main one, the non-aggression principle, can be expressed as do no harm. That's it in its very simplest form. You can expand it to do not treat others in a way you would not wish to be treated yourself. It's the most simple golden rule for us to adhere to in our daily behaviors and thoughts and actions, and yet the chaos and the madness that we have playing out in the world just goes to show how far we have yet to go in terms of large numbers of people grasping that most simple of rule and applying it in their lives. So we're all governed by it, by the creative force behind the universe, and we reap a certain set of karmic consequences according to whether we align ourselves with that basic teaching, do no harm. It's my belief that the dark controllers of these industries recognize that that dynamic is in play, and they recognize that they, like us, can reap certain karmic consequences if they break that rule of do no harm. But their way round it, in their sick, twisted mindset, is to tell us what they plan to do. That's why they do things like predictive programming. We're expected to know from that what the plan is, what they've just announced. When we don't voice any kind of objection to it, and in most cases, how could we? Because we've not properly understood what's being conveyed. But nevertheless, as they see it, they've given us an opportunity to know. And when we don't say, no, we're not having that, you can't do it, they take that as a green light for them to go right ahead and roll out whatever plan they always had. As they see it, they've then done no harm. Because we've not objected and we've not said no, we don't perceive it as harm, so they're off the hook in terms of the karmic consequence. I always say that I see that as a very sick, twisted interpretation of events, and I think these individuals have a big shock coming on the day that they exit their bodies and leave this reality and truly face the karma that they've accumulated for themselves. But nevertheless, that's why I believe things like predictive programming are done. So at the end of the book, I attempt to show why all this symbolism is employed and why it's placed there to give us an opportunity to know, because in my view, it ties into this free will consciousness that we have and the ability to consent to certain situations or not. And, you know, again, that ties into natural law. That's a conclusion that I've come to, and it's the main message that you leave with when you've read the book, because I think it's a profoundly important one. It's one which not many other researchers into the music industry go into, but it's the very crux of all my work, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think your description of this twisted psychology the elite have was very spot on. I agree with you, but I needed the words, so it was good I could read it in your books. The last question I have for you, or maybe the audience also have some afterwards, that is that the 21st of April this year we lost Prince, who I, as a chemtrail researcher, really loved, because Prince were one of the few artists, if not the only one, who actually in an interview mentioned chemtrail as a big problem for
You're not
our
really supposed to talk about chemtrails when you're a celebrity, are you?
No. So what's your take on the death of Prince? Because there was a lot of word with elevator and elevating. What's your take on that?
Well, I'll keep this one brief as well. I could talk about Prince for 2 hours probably. It's been quite devastating this year because we lost David Bowie at the start of the year, or we're told we did. You know, anything is possible. And then, of course, Prince. These were two massive, iconic music artists. It makes me wonder what other tricks they might have up their sleeve for this year, 2016, given that, as Johan was touching on with numerology earlier, numbers are very important to these sick individuals that we have running the show. And 6 times 6 times 6, 666 is a very beloved number of these individuals and these networks. 6 times 6 times 6 is 216. And if you take out the 0 of this year, 2016, you get 216. So I wonder if they've got another one up their sleeve between now and the end of the year. But absolutely devastating to lose Prince. When it comes to the deaths of these major iconic music artists, I don't think you can make a blanket statement such as they're all ritual sacrifices, they're all hoaxes, they all happened exactly as the mainstream media told us. I think you have to take each individual case and examine it. So there's a lot of evidence to support the idea that certain artists in some way fake their deaths and they never actually died the way we're told they did. I think there's a lot of evidence to support that with Jim Morrison, also with Elvis Presley. A lot of researchers think you can also apply that to David Bowie and Michael Jackson. But I think there are certain artists where it's pretty clear that they were taken out, and Prince would fall into that category. As far as I'm concerned, the decision was made to take Prince out probably quite a long time ago, because back in the 90s, Prince was getting very critical about his record company, Warner Brothers. He was discussing the nature of the deal that artists have with the corporations that own them, and how unfair it is and how it's all weighted in the benefit of the corporation. As Frank mentioned, he spoke about chemtrails. He's supposed to have made comments about the Zionist Jews that run the industry is the reason I will never play Israel. You can imagine that a celebrity coming out and making a public comment like that is not exactly going to ingratiate themselves to those that control the industry. So it wouldn't surprise me if the decision was made some time ago to get rid of Prince for these kind of political reasons. But whenever they make this decision, the act itself is absolutely steeped in ritual sacrifice, in line, again, with their belief systems, this dark kind of ancient religion which they practice. So we had a lot of symbolic stuff with the death of Prince, most of it involving the colour purple, which is a colour that's always associated with Prince, and much of it seemed to be connected to the 90th birthday of the Queen of England, which occurred at the exact same time as we lost Prince. So you had things like a beer, a brand new type of beer was launched by the Green King pub chain in the UK, and it was called Purple Rain. Rain as in R-E-I-G-N, as in a queen would reign, but obviously wordplay on Prince's famous album and movie. And all kinds of other stuff, which indicated that the death of Prince was something that had been planned for quite a long time. And it did seem to tie into the birthday celebrations of the Queen. Also, the date becomes interesting, 21st of April. There have been so many events that have happened on or around the 19th, 20th, 21st of April over the years, such as the Oklahoma City bombing, the Waco siege in Texas, a whole bunch of others that I've forgotten about. But that whole period from the 19th, 20th of April leading up to the 1st of May, which is known as Beltane, has always been known as a period of sacrifice in the ancient world, going back to certain civilizations and mystery schools. And so you find a lot of events involving death by sacrifice occur round about the 20th of April. So it becomes very interesting that Prince was reported to have died on the 21st of April. And then you got all this stuff with the elevator. You know, Prince referenced the elevator in his song, Let's Go Crazy. And he believed that there was some mystic, occultic significance to the concept of an elevator, particularly with the L at the beginning, L relating to Saturn, as we heard earlier. And then we just happened to hear that Prince is discovered dead in an elevator on his Paisley Park complex. What were the chances of that happening? I think there are so many symbolic clues that have been given to us with this one that we can conclude that this was a ritual sacrifice of a much-loved artist.
Yeah, and our former speaker, Johan Oldenkamp, also made a quite good video about his death, where he also stated a lot of important things. For example, I think it was an episode of Simpsons in 2008 where Simpsons, he actually kills a guy with this tune, very much in purple.
Quite clearly Prince, yeah.
Yeah, quite clearly. So you could be right. Already in 2008, they actually told us that he's gonna die, and their twisted minds, they will get good karma for that.
There was an episode of The Simpsons, I can't recall whether it was this same episode as the one that Prince featured in, but there was also an episode which played the song All the Young Dudes by Mott the Hoople, and this was a song that was written by David Bowie. And of course we lost Bowie in January, or we're told we did, and around about the same time the drummer of the group Mott the Hoople was reported to have died as well. So you have the Prince, the Mott the Hoople and the David Bowie elements all encoded into an episode of The Simpsons a few years ago, and then we get the deaths of all of these artists, or connected to these artists, within a very quick time frame in this year.
Yeah.
So I think they're trying to tell us something.
Very interesting year indeed.
Sure is.
We could have continued talking about this book. It's you also see it's not a small book.
We've got to finish 9 o'clock tomorrow night, though, right? So
yeah,
no chance.
Yeah. So, but maybe we have time for some small questions. We have to be on again precisely 17 o'clock, because then we have Dana Dunford on Skype to tell you about Fukushima. But should we? Any of you have some questions? I will be the one going around because you have the mic I normally use.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to hear a little more about the killing of Whitney Houston. She died on the 11th, Whitney Houston. So you said they want to show us. Do they want to tell us that we're idiots, or what? What do they want to tell us by telling us that this was again the 11th?
Well, like I said, I think they're trying to escape this burden of karma that they feel would otherwise come down on them. It's the best explanation I have as to why they give us these symbolic clues. And they do it in the confidence that most people will not be able to interpret the symbols and the numbers that they use. But I think more and more people are learning to do just that. They're learning to understand what the numbers mean. They're learning to predict the ways in which these sick individuals work. And I think it's very important for people to become symbol literate and start to think the way these individuals think, because I think we're going to be able to call them out so much more when these things go down. There was a lot of strange stuff with Whitney Houston. As Frank mentioned, there was downstairs in the Beverly Hilton LA hotel what appeared to be a celebration of the fact that she'd been sacrificed, and she was lying dead in a bathtub a few floors before. It was an industry party hosted by a man named Clive Davis, who is a guy who is well worth researching. There's lots to know about him. He's been a veteran of the industry for many decades, and I would say he's one of the key players in terms of those that direct the music industry and keep things going. So lots of strange elements with Whitney Houston. But again, I think we were given the opportunity to know what was going to come, but how are we supposed to interpret these things? I hope that answers that.
Listen, I've heard, other interviews where they've been talking about the Illuminati sending messages to each other, Taylor Swift, Adele, for example. Is there anything like that in your book about that they're actually sending these songs, it's information to all the Illuminati, all the people who are in the know?
Well, I think there is. We see all this symbolism, and I do go into it big time in the book, and I've mentioned it in previous talks. You see things like the one eye all the time, and the 666 sign, and the horned hands. You see artists doing this all the time. And I think part of it is to have a subliminal effect on the subconscious mind of the masses that are watching it, because these symbols carry certain energy and certain intent in terms of what they've been charged with by those that are using them. But also it's a method of communication between those that are in the know. So you know, if you have somebody that is a part of one of these satanic secret societies that sees Miley Cyrus up there on a stage giving it this, it's kind of an indication to them that this artist is down with the agenda. This artist is with the program. She's controlled. She's part of, you know, what we represent. I think that's a reason for doing it.
She's saying to the other group, listen, we fell out, we have to get back together again and sort the problem. The Illuminati, they've been split up for some reason, and she's singing to them, or she's telling them a message, you know, listen, we fell out, but we have to get back together again. You know, these sort of things. They're talking to each other, try to explain each other, you know, try to get back together.
Yeah, I think there could be communication going on there. I've not looked into that specific song. It wouldn't surprise me if that goes on. I mean, there is what's known as witch language, which is, you know, words and phrases which seem to mean one thing, but to those in the know, they have double meanings, and they can be encoded into songs so that if you're in the know, you can get an entirely different meaning from a song to other people. Because there are so many songs that have lyrics that seem to make no sense. They're completely baffling. But to someone that studies witch language, it's a definite method of communication. That does go on.
I have a question about you said there is this dark priest class, and then you said there is the Zionist Jews who run the industry. So is the dark priest class the Zionist Jews? Or, like, you said that, yeah, is this the same people?
Well, it's very difficult to pin down specific individuals or specific groups that are at the helm of all of this. You know, you can know that there is a dark occult priest class by their actions and the symbols that they place everywhere. But in terms of naming them or identifying certain groups, it's very difficult to do that. The one thing you can be sure of is the fact that there are a very large number of individuals who identify themselves as Jewish. So we're going back to what Johan was talking about in terms of the majority of people in the world today that refer to themselves as Jewish are actually Khazarian or Ashkenazi Jews descended from the Khazars. They have absolutely no genealogical link to the land of Israel whatsoever. There's a hugely out of proportion number of these people at the helm of the music industry, Hollywood movies, the television industry, and I've been accused of being anti-Semitic for even mentioning that, or questioning why that should be. How is that anti-Semitic, which is a ridiculous phrase anyway, just to ask the question of why it is that there's such a largely out of proportion number of these individuals controlling the industry compared to the number of them in general society? I think it's a valid question to ask. I don't really necessarily have an answer to it, but people should certainly be asking that question. It may be the key to understanding a bit more who the ultimate controllers are. But there is no easy answer to exactly who they are and to name names that way.
We just have last questions. Remember, tomorrow we also have the panel debate, and Mark will be here, so if you have special questions, you can ask him privately. Mads, you have a question too?
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Yeah, basically, before you mentioned that the people who get into positions of power in politics and, of course, the music industry, they have either connections to these bloodlines, but also if they're willing to sacrifice a lot, personal sacrifices, they can get ahead. I've read somewhere else that they also have to do a lot of public humiliation rituals. Can you make a comment on that? Do you agree with that?
From what I've heard, that does take place, yeah. So these orgies, these mad industry parties that I mentioned, from what I hear, all manner of degrading, humiliating stuff goes on there. I mean, one specific one that I've heard about came from Professor Griff of the group Public Enemy, who's had a lot to say about the true nature of the Illuminati music industry, and he's had some personal experience of it. And he often calls out P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Sean Puffy Combs, you know, whatever name you want to give to him, the long-time producer of coming out of Bad Boy Records, who was the mentor to Notorious B.I.G., who died in some very strange circumstances, one of so many. And Griff says, this is him saying it, I can't prove it, I'm just reporting what he says, that Puff underwent a initiation ritual, which is very similar to what happens at the Skull and Bones Society coming out of Yale University. And one of their initiation rituals involves lying naked in a coffin, masturbating, recounting your sexual history while your peers stand around the coffin looking in and watching you. That to me is pretty humiliating. And we hear that that's one of the initiations that is required if you want to rise up through the ranks of the industry. So that would be one example.
I think we will end for today with this year's reality talk, and I want to thank Mark very much to come back to us and present your book, and I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Now we will have a break, but it's important to be back here exactly on 5:17 because we cannot control the other man in Vancouver or nearby. Have a good break.